So I'm struggling with the camera stuff again, as always. I'm going to do a video right now about something near and dear to my heart and to a lot of folks on the planet. It's going to be a video about this thing right here. We used to call them fat Gitzits. About my buddy Guido Hibdon. I'm Dale Verts, old school as it gets. I'll be right back. So the whole Gitzit thing, or fat Gitzit thing, come about early 80s. And the story I'm going to tell is about my buddy Guido Hibdon. If you don't know who Guido is, or Guido, as he was known formerly, you need to look up Guido. And most people watching this channel know who he was, understand I had a special relationship with him. I wish I had more of a relationship. Genius bass fisherman, Bassmaster Classic winner, B.A.S.S. Angler of the Year, and a tremendous teacher and a purveyor of never being finished at looking at things and researching things and learning more about the fish. What we all ought to strive to do to this day. The fat Gitzit. Oh yeah, sweet. A bait that I'm not throwing as much as I ought to today, and I've started thinking about that. Talk about how all this starts. I think it's a neat story. It's just one of many. Hope you guys like this. So the story today is about the fat Gitzit and my buddy Guido Hibdon. Now, Geet, as we called him, the locals, friends of his, was my hero. I've talked about that before. I can't say enough. I think about Geet every day. If you don't know who he was, I won't say shame on you. It's past history. It's old stuff. Bassmaster Classic winner, Bass Angler of the Year. A man that never quit thinking. He was a epitome of deep thought when it come to bass fishing. And it's just one of the many things that he was on the cutting edge of, and he did things with that you can't believe. The Gitzit come about in the early 80s and almost took over the bass fishing world. It was like the jigging frog, jigging pig at that time. And to this day, it's still a tremendous bass bait. I'm going to talk about that and Geet's influence on me and on this bait. Still fighting the camera stuff. Remembering to turn things on, external mics. I need to play with this more. Man, I hate technology. We know that, don't we? If you haven't watched my channel before, don't watch any old videos unless you want to hear me rant about technology. So, the Gitzit. They call them tubes nowadays. You don't ever hear the word Gitzit. It's a tube. A lot of times, salt infused. That one's got a little salt in it. You stretch them out, all kinds of cool things. Basically, a tube, well, crappie tubes are only 3/4 inch to 1.5 inches long. Basically, for bass fishing, 2 to 4 or so inches long. Fished a variety of ways. I'm going to tell you the story about how I found out about the tube to start with. It's a Guido Hibdon story. And I think it was 1982. I didn't research this as usual. 81 or 82, the U.S. Open on Lake Mead, the biggest tournament in the world besides the Bassmasters Classic for a long time, and still a pretty big event from what I hear. To win that was a big special deal. So Geet came back that year, I think, he finished second. So I'm over at a mutual friend's of ours' house, my hometown. I go over there a lot. I help make him and Geet's jigs, whatever. He's my fishing, another guru I followed. And I go over to his house and Geet's truck's there. Geet always drove a Ford pickup truck. It wasn't new then. Probably a 79 or an 80, whatever. But it had a camper shell on it. It said it was a Guidon camper shell. Guidon. One time I took a Sharpie and I marked out the N. I forgot about it. I don't know if anybody ever said anything. Everybody knows. So it's a Guido. See the crap your brain dredges up? Anyway, I go in the house. Didn't knock. Don't have to. Go back in there and my buddy Jim and Geet are sitting at the kitchen table. And Geet's got his hands cupped in front of him like this on the table. I sat down, and the tone changed when I walked in the room, and I knew that. I said before in a video that these guys had a language that they spoke that I never really mastered. A way to communicate with each other, and I figured out years later that I was doing the same thing on my own level with people. You could say things and convey stories and information across the room, and nobody knew what you was talking about. I kind of not as good as those guys. Those guys were masters. It's like that Austin Powers deal where him and his dad are talking in that funky language. Anyway, so they're talking about the tournament. And of course, I sat right down there soaking it up. But Geet's hand stayed like this the whole time. For probably 15, 20 minutes. And I'm staring at it. I ain't said nothing, which is rare, but I didn't say nothing. I'm an 18, 19-year-old kid with my hero and guys I really had a lot of respect for. And Jim said to Geet, he says, you might as well just show him. He's going to figure it out someday anyway. What? The fact that Guido Hibdon wanted to hide something from me at all? Cool. He lifts his hands up, and underneath it's a pile of these. I said, what the heck is that octopus-looking thing right there? And he said, that's a fat Gitzit. He said, this is the coming thing in bass fishing. I'm all ears. I'm in for the count now. Yeah, Geet said the coming thing. I'm going to pay attention. So he talked about the tournament, which is a whole other story. I need to research that story. I need to make sure I got my part correct. Whatever. Why Geet didn't win that tournament. Yeah. That's a whole nother story. Not as long as this one, I promise. Blah, 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 blah. I know, I got the blah down, don't I? So that was the beginning of the Fat Gitzit in this part of the country. I don't know if anybody'd ever heard of or seen it before. It was definitely a Western thing, a Bobby Garland thing. And Geet made some history with that bait. Now, his first B.A.S.S wins were during those years. 80, 81, winning Lake the Ozarks down here on a jig and port frog. Then eventually the jig and Fireclaw, Dion Fireclaw became the Guido bug. A lot of history. Man was a bait-making fool. And that's the only thing he was foolish at. The thing about Geet and that Gitzit was with a lighter line, 6-pound line mostly. He did throw 4. Wow. And he was a master at it. He skipped it. He got to where skipping was nothing new to him even then, but the Gitzit is like a little flat rock. It will flat skip. It will, and I watched him. Matter of fact, another story. Blah, 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 blah. I know. One day I was on Lake the Ozarks, and there's a little creek. Nobody knows this creek by this name hardly, unless you live here. It's Terry Creek. No point holding back. It's not on any map anywhere to say Terry Creek. It's one of his favorite places to fish, apparently. It's also where he caught a lot of big fish. But I'm in there with a buddy. We're just fishing. We're fishing on bank, and Geet's on the other side of the big cove, basically. And I'm watching him skip with that spinning rod, and it was a treat. For the longest time, I didn't think he even knew he was there. But he knew. You didn't pull much over on Geet. Finally, we got close enough. He hollered at us, come on over. We got a seminar on skipping to Gitzit. From Guido Hibdon. Yeah, think about that. Wow. He'd skip that thing so far underneath the dock, you think it was going next county. It was crazy. But one thing about the Gitzit, and the way I'm not fishing it, because there's a couple, 3 ways, it's very versatile, pretty versatile bait. Not as versatile as some, but pretty close. It is a 12-month bait. Not very many baits are. He, very light head. He tried Guido's heads. I got some heads he gave me years ago that just aren't perfect, but they're close. I don't know if he ever, I'm sure he improved on it. He never gave up. But you put on a light enough head, and the head goes inside the body. But the trick is, when you throw it, and you throw slack at it, it spirals as it falls. That was a trick to a Gitzit, from 2 foot deep to 25 foot deep. And especially for suspended fish, that spiral. When it quit falling, if it was too short, if it's short of the bottom, you set the hook. He did it in shallow water, too. And everybody's forget that. I don't think preach that anymore or not. That's a way to fish it. Come, about 1999, 2000, guys figured it out. And a bunch of them I have are a little bit bigger and fatter. I got a bunch of 4 inchers, 4.5 inchers. You flip them. And Geet did that too. You flip them on a jig head or you flip them with a Texas rig. And they're really good at that too. They're awesome flipping baits. They're one of the first creature baits, truthfully. If you look back in the day, we didn't have the brush hogs and the creature baits, the gollywompers, the muskrats, the beavers. So it was one of the first true creature baits. But the way Geet fished it, with that spiral and fish on light line, he fished brush with it. Oh man, he throwing stuff with that light line, scary to death, but he had some tricks. And I may talk about that someday, do some of the things he showed me there. I got lots of stories, y'all. I can't help it. Most of them are even true. So if it's all going somewhere, it's just the fact Guido Hibdon was a freaking genius when it came to anything. But with that Gitzit, he was on top of it. I watched Fishin. I came back a few years ago and started watching stuff, and I was amazed at the early mid-2000s how many people was flipping these Gitzits. And they were calling them tubes by then already. Just a tube. If you don't throw a Gitzit, you never have thrown a Gitzit, you need to. I have realized I'm not throwing one enough. I used to have one on my rod whenever I had topwater bait out. Buzzbait, spook, popper, whatever, all my old school stuff. Whopper popper. I've never thrown a whopper popper on a reservoir yet. Is that a mistake? Maybe. It's a tremendous follow-up bait for missed fish on topwater. I did a follow-up deal video on my other channel. Maybe it was when I first started a bass fishing channel. I don't remember. It really worked out that well that day because I was making them follow up. I followed up on the original bait. I followed up on pitching jigs and sluggos and sluggos. There you go. That's my soft jerk bait, my fluke. Because I'm old, but it was really worked out well that day. They'd follow up sometimes the original bait, but a Gitzit on a light head is a great. Cause it hits the water, you throw slack at it, and it starts to go like this, and it kind of goes away from the fish back to the fish. It's something you really ought to have, and I am not doing it anymore. It's one of many things I think I'm not doing anymore. I need to get back to. Always have one on a rod. It just, you see a fish school shad, you throw a little Gitzit to it, a little 2.5, 3 inch, 3.5 inch Gitzit to them in a shad color, or bluegill color, let it fall through them. Oh man, y'all. Back to that day that I was at Jim's house and Geet was there and he showed me these baits. I went home that night and got my old chemistry set out from grade school. I took a test tube out of that kit. My family owned a commercial greenhouse, and I went out there and poured plastic. So I went out and fired my propane stove up. I used to pour plastic over propane. That was a mess sometimes. Not much room for screwing up. I heated me up some plastic. I started dipping that test tube. Made me some Gitzits. They come out pretty good. I made them about 4 inches long, and I'd only seen them for a few minutes there at Jim's house. And I cut the tails with scissors. Went back to him the next day and held them out. And he goes, "Well, you kids will think of everything, give you enough time." I heard that a lot from him and Geet. I was proud of that. Yeah. The way that Geet made them is better than most companies. There's one he gave me. He gave me a pile of them years back. That's a little 2.5 inch G. They call it G2. I don't know if they ever made that commercial. Really tapered. See that? I got several of these left in 2.5, 3.5, maybe 4 inchers. Got that tape. They're hard to pour that way. I do make Gitzits. I've only made a few. I bought a deal and I haven't quite. There's an art to it and getting the plastic right. I'm gonna make some more this winter. I don't know why. I probably own 1,000 of them. Literally. And look at this box full of Gitzits. Like everything else, you can never have too many baits, right? So I'm gonna mess with the Gitzit thing more. It's one of those things I've got away from. The other thing in the wintertime I haven't got away from is dragging them on a shaky head style deal. Oh, yeah. Unbelievable cold water, cool water bait. Tough fishing bait. Of course, flipping them on a flipping head on like a big arky or just a weedless jig head or Texas rig. yeah, it's just one of the coolest baits there is. It's a good numbers bait, and once in a while, especially the wintertime stuff, it's a good big fish bait. So I want to share that little Geet story. He was a master. He invented things. He come up with things. He reinvented things. And he was my hero and my buddy, and I miss him. I think about him every day. Appreciate you guys watching as always. God bless. I'm going to go do something else for a little bit. Probably edit video.